Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Shalom, shalom. Wasn't that nice, cheesy, cheesy klezmer music? Yeah, I thought that would be a fun way to start. Anyway, I hope everybody's well. I hope you're happy and healthy, doing fine, getting out a little bit with all the regulations, with a mask and everything. So, very happy that you joined us here tonight or today, wherever you am. I wanted to dedicate today's session to two people who I never met, but who I regret that I never met. They are my dear grandfather on my father's side, both of blessed memory. His name was Menachem Adler. His Hebrew name was Menachem ben Harav Asher Anshel. And also my uncle, the son of my father's father, my father's brother, Robert Adler, Yosef ben Menachem. Actually, I was given only one name when I was born. I was given the name of Ilan, born in Israel. So Ilan is a very Israeli name, which means tree or sapling. Anyway, so many, many years ago, I decided I would take on my uncle's first name, Yosef, and add that to my name. So now when I'm called up to the Torah, I'm called Ilan Yosef. When I put my name in a book, I put in Ilan Yosef, and that's a way of keeping my uncle's memory alive in some way. So we don't know when they were murdered. They were murdered in the Holocaust. We don't know the date, and so for many of the survivor community, they have chosen the date of Sivan 20, Sivan 20, which I think is Thursday night, Friday. I have to check. And that has been like an international day of Holocaust victim remembrance. So they were both, unfortunately, Holocaust victims, both murdered. We're not even sure where. But anyway, I wanted to remember them and I wanted to dedicate tonight's or today's learning in their sweet and loving memory and the hope that their neshama, that their soul, after all of these many, many years, will be revived and will be nourished by what it is that we study and discuss tonight. So again, thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Tell me what you thought of the music, which 10 seconds of that was about enough. Would you agree? Maybe it was nice. I don't know. Anyway, maybe I'll choose some other music the next time. So, dear friends, this is the portion of Shlachlecha. This is what is going to be read this coming Shabbat here in Israel. Baha'alotcha will be read outside of Israel. You can check my video from last week for the portion of Baha'alotcha to see some beautiful Derech Eretz lessons there. You probably may have listened last week and you say, I have to listen to it again. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. I'm just saying, if you want some things for your Shabbat table or for discussion, um, you can go back to my Baha'alotcha session that was on, I think, the 3rd of June. So today we're going to be discussing Shlachlecha, a very, very sad Torah portion. The opening part of Shlachlecha is going to report a huge national calamity. Moses sends 12 individuals who are good, righteous, reliable, trustworthy, respected leaders, one from each tribe. There are 12. And he sends them to go spy out the land of Canaan, which is the Holy Land, which is Israel, which is where I am right now. Thank God. He sends these 12 spies. They are there for 40 days. 40 days. So, Derech Hart's lesson number 1, we're going to look from chapter 13 in the book of Numbers, chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. They're the opening verses of the portion of Shlachlecha. And it says, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, God said to Moses, saying, Shlachlecha anashim, send for yourself people, men, v'yaturu et Eretz Canaan. Let them go. The translations say, spy out the land of Canaan. You know, they were only a few days from actually going into the Holy Land. We know the other side of the story. We know that they were going through the desert another 38 years because of what happened in this week's Torah portion. Calamity, disaster. Anyway, Moses sends 12 of them. 2 of them are perhaps more righteous and more protected than the others. One, his name is Yehoshua bin Nun, Joshua, his trusted second in command, if you will. And the other one is Kalev ben Yefuna, Caleb. Caleb. So these two out of the 12, well, you'll see what happens with these two, and you'll see what happens with the other 10. Anyway, so God says to Moses, I hear that people are clamoring to have like a reconnaissance team. Before we go into this land, we need to know, what is the land like? What is it like? So God would say, it doesn't matter what it's like. I'm going to be with you. You're going to go into the land of Canaan. Don't you worry about it. I'm going to be with you. I'll fight your fights. I'll do your battles. Don't worry. But the people wanted a group. Please send a reconnaissance mission and let them come back. So what does Moses tell this group of 12? He tells them, you know, only the facts, ma'am. Remember that phrase? Only the facts. So he says to them, go find out, what is the land like? Tell us something about the climate. What about the terrain? Are the cities open? Are they fortified? Are there a lot of gates? Is it hard to get into the various cities? What are the people like? Are they healthy? Are they vigorous? Right? They got to schlepping along. Tell it. I need to know what they're like so I can report it back to the people, etc. Give facts and figures, and that's all Moses asked for: facts and figures. So the first Derech lesson, if you would ask me, is when you go on a mission, when you're asked to do something, could be in any kind of a situation, you're asked to do something, um, you have to know what's expected. And not only to know what's expected, but do that job. What are the pluses and minuses you need to do on that job? What information is needed? Understand your goal. Know your place. If you're not an expert in any of these details, just report the details. Don't give us your assessment of the details if you're not qualified to do that. Um, and that's really a place where they tripped. They tripped. These 10 out of the 12, they tripped on this because they came back with a negative, I would call it nasty report on the Holy Land. Imagine that. Imagine that. God wants to give them the gift of the Holy Land forever and ever. Uh, 10 out of 12 people come back disparaging, disappointing. What kind of a country is this? Anyway, we'll talk more about that in just a few moments. So, Derech lesson number 1, when you're sent on a mission, when you're asked to do anything by anybody, know exactly what you have to do, know your place, know your goal in what your mission is, and know your expertise, and don't go beyond it. Don't go beyond your expertise. If you don't know more, don't say more. Don't assess more. Okay? So that's Derech lesson number 1. And you'll see how important that Derech lesson is in terms of what goes on in this week's Torah portion. Derech lesson number 2. This is now chapter 13 in the book of Numbers, and verses 25, 26. Vayashuvu mitur haaretz. It's interesting that the word in Hebrew, latur, is almost like the English word, T-O-U-R, to tour. I don't know what to say about that, but vayashuvu mitur haaretz miketz arba'im yom. Now they've gone, they've gotten all kinds of information, they've been there for 40 days, they now return. And the verses say, they now come to Moses and Aaron and to the entire assembly. And they brought back the report to them and the entire assembly. Is that good? Is that a good thing? Moses is the one who asks for the information, and they come back and they give the report to the entire assembly. So here is my Derech Eretz lesson from this thing, okay? Let's say that you're an accountant and you were hired by the CEO of an organization or a company, and the CEO, here's your mission. Your job is to find out, how hard are the people working in your company? How many people are looking at Facebook 3 hours a day? How many people are standing around the coffee area more than they should? How much work is getting done on a weekly basis? Does it match the expectation of the CEO? Does it match what he's paying them? Is he paying them too much, too little? You're an accountant and you've been hired to do this. So how much do I have? You have a month. Go take a month and get me the facts and figures that I need to know. So now you're the accountant. You're done with your work. Who do you report to? And you would say, well, hey, Let me report to the people. I'll report to all the employees. That's not the correct answer. Okay, I'll report to the board of directors. So also not the right answer. The right answer is I'll report to the CEO. The CEO sent you, and the CEO is the one to whom you should first turn with all of your facts and all of your information. Whatever you've got to say, you don't say it to the people, you say it to the person who sent you. And this was another one of the grave mistakes. They should have reported only to Moses. And if you're given a mission by somebody, you report to that person. You don't leak information into the newspapers. Let people know before the person who sent you knows. What an embarrassment that is. That's not a good place to be in. So to me, that's a very important Derech Eretz lesson. By the way, I mentioned the term leaks in the newspaper. Do we not hear that often? That before the whoever is supposed to get a report from whatever, it's leaked out into the press. And then the person who sent for the report, who asked for it, sits there and they're very embarrassed because they should have been the first one to know. I think this applies in family relationships, it applies in business, it applies in religion, synagogue, church, wherever it is. I think this really applies. Whatever your mission, whoever sent you, that's to whom you give the report of whatever else you found. So I think it's very important. Derech Eretz lesson number 3. Again, chapter 13, verses 26 and 27. Vayar'um et pri haaretz. When the 12 came back, Moses asked them to please bring back an example of the fruit of the country. So when they came back, the Vayisapru lo vayomru, they said to him, so maybe now they're talking to Moses, but in the midst of the entire congregation. This is not private. And Derech Eretz lesson number 2, it should have been. It should have been very private. They say in Yiddish, shah still, just to Moses. So here they're reporting to Moses, except it's in the hearing of the entire nation, and they've got bad news. They really have terrible, calamitous, disastrous news that's going to cost them for the next 40 years. That's how disastrous it is. So they're now ready to give an explosive report, and Vayisaprulo, they say to Moses in the hearing of the entire nation, Vayomru, and they say to him, Banu el haaretz, we have come to and from the land, Asher Shalachtanu, that you sent us to, V'gam zavat chalav udvash, and it was a land of milk and honey. Nice, milk and honey. V'zeh pirya, and here is its fruit. So what did they get? What, a nice a nice kiwi? I don't think so. What did they bring? You probably know. A huge cluster of grapes. It was so huge that it had to be carried by 8 people with 4 poles holding up this entire humongous cluster of grapes. So they show the grapes. They say it's a land of milk and honey. And that's kind of where it stops, because the next word they say in Hebrew, ephes, in English, but. And that but is going to cost everybody listening, except the women. The women did not listen. The women did not get punished. Everybody who listened and everybody who cried because of this terrible report, it's going to cost them that word but, and how they listened to the but and all the stuff after that word is going to cost them dearly. So what's the Derech Eretz lesson right here? I would say that they did one right thing amidst a lot of calamity. And the right thing was that they knew that they were going to be critical. They knew it. They probably discussed among themselves, what are we going to say back to Moses and the people when we return after 40 days? They probably spoke among themselves and decided, listen, we'll say a couple of nice things, but it's a disaster to go into that country. We are going to lose our lives, and we are going to be smashed to smithereens because of what we're going to talk about in a moment. So Derech Eretz lesson number 3 is, before you criticize, before you're asked to be critical about something, you begin with praise. And that's exactly what they did. Look at this cluster of grapes. Isn't that grape? Look at that. what a country, right? Yakov Smirnov, what a country. Look what it produces. This is amazing. Uh, and not only that, but they said this is a land flowing with milk and honey. That's a nice thing to say. Milk, lovely. Honey, beautiful. We know that this is a way to describe Eretz Israel, a land of milk and honey. So that was the nicest thing they did, is before the critique, before the negativity, they first spoke about the virtues of the land, and then they spoke about the faults of the land. Now, I don't know if we've been doing this since the time that we read the Torah portion in Leviticus of Shmini. I don't know if we started back then. In chapter 11 of the book of Leviticus, it says the kosher laws. Uh, a kosher domesticated animal has a split hooves, it chews its cud. A kosher bird is a bird that does not go and attack others to get its food. It is not a bird of prey. A fish needs to have fins and scales. So it gives us various examples and all that. When the Torah portion describes in the book of Leviticus, in the portion of Shmini, when it describes the unkosher animals, these animals are unkosher. The first thing it describes is the kosher feature. It has split hooves, but it does not chew its cud. It does chew its cud, but it does not split it. It does not have split hooves. So in those 4 or 5 instances describing various unkosher animals, the first thing to be mentioned is the kosher detail and not the unkosher detail. And from that, the rabbis learn the same lesson, Derech Eretz lesson number 3, that when we're going to critique, if we need to critique, a letter of recommendation, somebody wants a job, they want a letter, they want somebody to call somebody, you have to be somewhat honest. But let's start with the good stuff. Start with the positive. Yes, this person is an excellent worker. This person is comes in every day on time. They stay a little bit extra. They don't know what they're doing, but that's for a little bit later. But that's Derech Eretz lesson number 3. What the spies did, the 10, and what we learned about the kashrut laws. That first, if you're going to need to be critical or critique, the first thing you do is say the nice things, and then after that, you say the the other stuff that you have to say, and in the nicest and kindest way. Our 10 spies did not do that. They were really rat-a-tat-tat about the horrors of the country that they went into. Okay, Derech Eretz lesson number 4. And this is still in chapter 13. Chapter 13 is action-packed in the book of Numbers. Shlachlecha is the portion. Chapter 13, verses 28 through 33. No, I'm gonna not going to read all of them right now. But again, we know Moses asked for facts and figures. It should have been a private report. This we've said a few times already. Here's the kinds of things they said. They said, the land devours its inhabitants. Wow, doesn't that make you want to go into the Holy Land as soon as possible? It devours its inhabitants. They reported that the people are giants. They're going to like squash us. The place is strong. There's no way we are going to march into the land of Canaan and be victorious to root out all the idolatrous nations in this holy land and then become God's chosen people in God's chosen land. There is no way we're going to be able to do that. Now, here's an interesting question. Were they asked to make an assessment of victory versus defeat? I don't think so. I don't remember that. Moses didn't ask for that. He only asked for facts and figures. And what did they do? They went way beyond their mission and gave their opinion. And you know what they say about opinions? If I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. If I wanted your opinion, I would ask for it. All they asked, Moses wanted facts and figures. They went way beyond it. And this is a huge chunk of the calamity. So this was their colossal mistake, that they gave opinions about whether they could be victorious, and nobody asked them to do that. By the way, they were on the spot for 40 days. Should the people not listen to them? Of course they listened to them. They were there. They were scared. They didn't know what would happen. They were not ready to go in. And the Torah describes them as crying the entire night. They were crying the entire night. Our commentators say that that night was Tisha B'Av. You know Tisha B'Av, the most calamitous day of the Jewish calendar. Tisha B'Av. Many things happened on the 9th of Av, which occurs during the summer, just a few weeks. Tisha B'Av was the day that both holy temples were destroyed, and many other calamities happened on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. And it all started with the nation crying bitterly that they don't want to go into the land of Israel, which was a free gift to the people, and they didn't want it. And God was not happy. If you were God, would you be happy with this crowd? I don't know what button I would be looking for. What a crowd. Here I got a beautiful gift. They don't want it. They don't trust. They have no faith in me. Anyway, the clincher of what they said in giving their, what I would call evil, terrible, not nice report, very negative, started out nicely. Look at the big cluster of grapes. Wow, what a country. Flowing with milk and honey. Wow, what a land. And then, boom, they came in with the nastiest assessment. Again, nobody asked them for the assessment. So, Derech Eretz lesson number 4. You're probably asking, where's he going with this? Thank you. It relates to the very last part of their report. Here's what they said. They said, we were like grasshoppers. Grasshoppers? Maybe they were in hospice. We were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so were we in theirs. We were like grasshoppers, teeny tiny, right? Giants. We were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so were we in their eyes. You don't have to be a licensed clinical social worker, psychiatrist, psychologist, somebody in the healthcare field to know that if you are going to feel like a grasshopper, it's not unusual for other people to agree with you that indeed you are a grasshopper. If you feel you're a nothing, you behave like a nothing, and people treat you like a nothing. That's just the way of the world. So one could almost say it started with that. They thought of themselves as a nothing and a nobody, tiny. We felt like insects compared to these. The Kotzker Rebbe, the great Rebbe of Kotsk, who is still studied today by hundreds of thousands of Jewish people, the Kotzker Rebbe, said, quote, almost a quote, they had no right to consider how the giants viewed them. You want to view yourself as a little grasshopper? That's fine. You have no right to say others look at you that way. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. You have no right to assume that they do that. And the Kotzker Rebbe says this was part of their humongous problem. As emissaries of God and the Jewish people, who are called by God in the Torah a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, they should have thought of themselves higher than a grasshopper, more important than a grasshopper. You are children of royalty, the children of God, the Holy Father, and you're thinking of yourself as a grasshopper. What's the disconnect there? So, Derech Eretz lesson number 4, not always easy. Don't degrade yourself. Don't put yourself down. Don't feel so infinitesimal in your own eyes. God created you with a purpose and a job and a role to fill. Each and every one of us has a God purpose and a job to fill. So, is that a good reason to feel like a grasshopper? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. So that's Derech Eretz lesson number 4. Remember who you are in the midst of your entire body. You have a spark of the divine that makes you special, special in the eyes of God, and should make you special in the eyes of your fellow human being. We don't see that a lot, unfortunately, nowadays, but that's an important lesson. Don't put yourself down. Don't degrade yourself. Don't feel tiny. Don't feel small. You are chosen with a purpose and a job here on earth by the Holy One, blessed be He. So don't feel like a grasshopper. Last of our Derech Eretz lessons as we come to the close of this session. Once again, in loving memory of my dear grandfather, Menachem ben Harav Asher Anshel, my dear uncle, Robert Adler Yosef ben Menachem, whose first name in Hebrew I carry as my second name in Hebrew. Here's Derech Eretz lesson number 5. Again, chapter 13. Wow, didn't know that. Verse 30. Chapter 13, verse 30. So by now the group has given their negative and disastrous report. God has given the nation a gift of a homeland. It's their ancestral heritage, and the people don't want it. They hear this god-awful report. They cry the entire night. And as I mentioned, this was the night of Tisha B'Av. The men are not going to live to see their entrance into the land of Israel. They're not going to live. All of the men who cried and believed the evil report and believed that over faith in God, etc., all of them will have died, except for the two, Kalev ben Yefuneh and Yehoshua ben Nun. These two people did something that's worthy of Derech Eretz lesson number 5. So the men are all going to die out. The women are not, because, as I mentioned earlier, the women did not participate in the grief and the tears, and therefore they either died out or survived, whatever, natural law, natural causes. They were not punished. The women were not punished, according to our tradition. So, what Joshua and Kalev did, is really the shining light in this dark episode. Because here's what they said. They said, when all of the other 10 were giving the grief and the awful critique and negativity and causing depression and causing people, the men, to cry the entire night, forgetting all about being faithful to God, faith in God. God will help us. He will lead the way. He will lead the charge, forgetting all about it. That's what these 10 men caused. So they broke away, these two gentlemen, Kalev and Yehoshua, they broke away from the negativity and they defended God and his gift. Here's the verse 30, chapter 13, book of Numbers. Vayahas Kalev et ha'am el Moshe vayomer. Kalev and Joshua were the two that had no negative reports. Kalev quiets these 10 people who were also in the land with him, and he says, Alo na'aleh, ki yachol nuchala. We will surely go up. We will surely ascend to the land, to the holy land that God wishes to give us. Ki yachol nuchala. We will certainly be able to do it, and we will certainly be victorious. The other 10 responded by saying, Lo nuchal. No, we're not going to be victorious. We're going to be pummeled. We're going to be stepped on. We're going to be killed. We're going to be murdered. What are you talking about, Kalev and Yehoshua? And Kalev and Yehoshua, they heard the exact same words as the nation of Israel did, and they decided to go against the tide and say, we will certainly be able to do it, and we will certainly be successful. Derech Eretz lesson number 5. They stood up to the pressure. They were not swayed by the crowd. They had minds of their own. They said and understood also it's a land of milk and honey. They understood it's going to take an effort. It's not going to be easy. But with God at the helm, right at the beginning, we are going to be victorious. Interesting about milk and honey, and then we'll have to stop because I think I've reached my 30-minute allotment. Milk and honey is very unusual. If you look around anywhere, I'm looking around here like I expect to find anything, but you know, if you're looking for fruits and vegetables, they're right there in front of you. You know, you go to shop, there's very nice, beautiful peppers, cucumbers, all the other stuff. Somebody says to you, let's say you didn't know anything about cows. Oh, how about getting us some milk? Really? Where is it? I don't know where it is. Again, this is before we know that cows give milk. Where is the milk? What are you talking about? Okay, forget about the milk. That might be too hard to find. Uh, Maybe bring home some honey. Honey? Where do you find it? This is before you know how honey is made. Where do you find it? The other stuff is right there. It's right in front of your eyes. But milk and honey are very unique in that there is process after process after process. There's a lot of hard work to make milk. No, right? The whole thing. Honey, bees, pollinate, go, come, honeycomb. Milk and honey are examples of things that do not come easily. It's not like picking a pepper or grabbing a cucumber or finding a watermelon. These take major league effort. And so Kalev and Yehoshua know that. They know that about the land of milk and honey. It's not going to be easy. It'll take time. It'll take effort. They have a setback or two. But with God at the helm, God leading the charge, Alo na'aleh, we will surely be victorious. Ki yachol nuchala, we will be able to do it. And with God leading the charge, we are going to be successful. And that, dear friends, is the last of the 5 Derech Eretz lessons today. They stood on their own. Can you imagine their bravery with all the other stuff going around? Can you imagine their courage, their resolve to go against the tide? Can you imagine that? Anyway, that's Derech Eretz lesson number 5, to find the courage within ourselves to do that whenever it's necessary, when it's called for, to go against the tide. I just want to mention one thing. We spoke earlier about what makes a kosher fish. And what makes a kosher fish is if they have fins and scales. Somebody once said, a rabbi, I don't remember who, he said that if salmon did not have fins and scales, if it did not have it, he would still declare salmon kosher. Why? Because salmon swim upstream. Salmon go against the tide. And very often that's what Jewish people do. The world does one thing, the Jewish people understand something totally different. And that's what Kalev and Yehoshua did. And that's kind of it, that was the shining light in this otherwise very dark episode. Anyway, for the next 38 years, the Jews are going to be going from place to place, not entering the land of Israel, all because of this. We still suffer because of this in many different ways. Destruction of temples, god-awful things happening on the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av. Anyway, maybe that's for another time. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I'll be checking your comments in just a few minutes. God willing, you'll be able to join me Monday night, I think, for Pirkei Avot. And again, the following Wednesday for 5 Derech Eretz lessons in the Torah portion. Have a great week. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for being with us. Take care, everybody, and shalom.